Yes. So I don't know if most of you know that at every Filia conference on the Saturday evening, there's some kind of rally or vigil, and it's different every year. So last year when it was held in Cardiff, I don't know whether Cathy actually knows this, it was the first time that Filia had handed over the organising of the rally, and you can see some pictures now, to actually the host city. So Filia handed it over to myself in terms of Merched Cymru, and to Cathy, obviously WRN Wales. So looking at Cathy's policing background and my background in violence against women and girls, it just seemed an obvious topic really that we would cover something around the appalling rates, conviction rates of rape and sexual violence. So that's what we decided that we were going to do. So we did some FOIs to the Welsh police forces, which I alluded to earlier, and asking basic things that we felt that should have been recorded. So things like the sex of the perpetrator, sex of the victim, age, just loads of different things like that. Two of the police forces didn't come back to us originally. I think one did quite sort of far down the line, but didn't have everything there. I mean, and some of the data clearly wasn't right, because if you looked at like the sex stuff, and I think, you know, Cathy can say something about the perpetrators of rape being female a bit in a minute. So we were looking through the FOIs for that, and it wasn't just like the instances in Wales, which was horrific. I mean, there were really like high volumes of, you know, of these rapes and sexual assaults. And we know they're just a fragment of what women are actually reporting, again, which is even more disturbing. I think for me, though, it was looking at the ages of not just the perpetrators, but of the victims. And we had those put up on some of the banners that we were carrying. I think the youngest we saw as a victim was 10 months, I think it was Cathy. And the oldest as a perpetrator was it 101? He was either 98 or 101. I get them wrong. And the oldest victim again was around 100. So I did a keynote speech around that, and I think for me what that really highlighted was just how women and girls from the day they are born, you know, this was a 10-month-old baby who had been sexually abused, up to a 100-odd-year-old woman, wherever we are in our lifespan, women are just being sexually abused, raped, assaulted. And it was around really to try and dispel those myths about, you know, women going out wearing short skirts, women being drunk, women saying the wrong thing. And that's what we really wanted to look at. And around that was the policing issue as well. So, sorry, let me just say something about that first. We wanted to offer some information to any woman that came to the rally, because, you know, we were dealing with really horrific subject matter there. So we were looking at giving them some support service numbers. So to do that, we really wanted to make sure that we were giving them numbers of services that were supporting women, females. And I trawled through every single sexual assault support service in Wales, every women's age group within Wales, and every single one of them that I saw, and if somebody knows of anything different, please let me know. I will be very happy to receive the information. Every single one of them said trans women were women. So you could not have a single sex service if you were a sexual assault survivor in Wales without the possibility of a man being in that same group or service as you. And that was really disheartening. You know, that was something that we found very difficult, because we had to provide some kind of information to women as we were there. Also, you know, we were in Cardiff, the capital of Wales. Welsh Women's Aid refused to attend the conference, and for me, more despicably, refused to give us leaflets to offer to women survivors of violence because of what Filia stood for. Cardiff Women's Aid refused to come, Swansea Women's Aid refused to come or give us any of their own information. And it just shows what we're up against in Wales. You know, the leading women's organisations around sexual violence, domestic abuse, just are not supporting us at all. So yeah, and then, you know, Cathy wanted to ask the police some key asks around the rally that we were doing, which Cathy worked on that, so she can tell us a bit about the postcards she produced.
Yeah, I think I've provided some links for you, Alison, either to share now or to share later, but there were 5 key asks really for the Welsh forces, but any force in the UK, relating to how the criminal justice system does treat women, because, you know, we are in the sort of shocking situation in many areas where rape has almost become decriminalised in effect. And, you know, we've got sort of endemic victim blaming in the system as well. I don't know if everybody realises, but, you know, obviously it's not just about the police. I know many police officers work very hard to get outcomes for women in rape cases and sexual violence cases. But, you know, the Crown Prosecution Service are very reluctant to authorise charges in anything but the most easy, overwhelming, clear-cut cases. You know, and the nature of these cases that, you know, you're very, very rarely going to find them. So, you know, women are being denied justice. I think, you know, picking up on something that Ali said as well about Women's Aid sort of not wanting to be there and not wanting their leaflets to be there. Filia is the largest feminist conference in Europe. You know, there were thousands of women in the capital city of Wales last year. I was really proud to be one of them, and I was really proud as well to be asked to play that role in relation to the Filia rally. I was, you know, extremely proud to sort of be on the stage as well at the beginning and the end of the Filia event. But despite that conference coming to our own capital city, not one Welsh government minister had the time or inclination to attend the event. They didn't send anyone to the rally either. You know, our Minister for Social Justice, Jane Hutt, has got a strategy on tackling violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence for 2022 to 2026. You'd think that in light of that, she'd prioritise attendance at the rally, if not the conference itself. But given that she doesn't respond to requests to meet with women's groups, perhaps, you know, it's not a surprise really that no Welsh government attended. You know, perhaps uppity women don't actually matter to Welsh government. But the rally was incredible. We heard, you know, very moving testimonies from women affected, and typically for Wales, it absolutely bucketed down with rain throughout. We were soaking. I held an umbrella over Ali for a keynote speech, otherwise she'd have been even wetter. But Welsh women are made of strong stuff. The rain did not deter us, but clearly Welsh government ministers must have thought they'd shrink in the rain or something because, you know, they didn't turn up.
Why do you think the Welsh government is so enraptured by this ideology?
I think, you know, we've seen it with Scotland as well, haven't we? I think it's a bit of a $1 million question, but I think there's probably a number of factors. You know, there's a desperation to be seen as progressive and having progressive policies. You know, the need to have a radically different identity to Westminster and to assert that. You've also got a situation where power is held by a relatively small group of people with no sort of second chamber potentially to hold them to account. So they're also, as a result of that, susceptible to influence from a small group of advisors as well. And I think there's a desperation once they're committed not to backtrack on that. It's a bit of an all or nothing approach, which is evident in some of our First Minister's announcements when he refuses to answer any questions he doesn't like and deflects from them. I mean, I think many of the people here will probably have seen last week Laura Ann Jones, a member of the Senedd, raising a question around the definition of women, and Mark Drakeford basically saying that they, you know, to raise that was shrill. You know, we thought that was a trope that had gone, you know, a long time ago to describe women sort of speaking up for women's rights, but no, we're shrill. So a misogynistic trope was rolled out against us. You know, mention of dog whistle politics was made. You know, women's rights were equated with racism. in that comment as well. You know, both Merched Cymru and WRN Wales have complained to the Standards Commissioner for the Senedd as a result. And there's sort of very arrogant and anti-democratic position in that, isn't there? I think, you know, Welsh Labour are very certain of their power base in Wales, which isn't sort of healthy for democracy. I attended a constituency Labour Party that was open for attendance last year with the CEO of Filia. And we put a question to Mark Drakeford about, you know, the concerns of women, you know, the fears that they had around their rights, and asked for a commitment to meet with women's groups. But, you know, as probably followers of our sort of groups will know, despite that commitment then being given publicly in that meeting and recorded by the other minister who was present, Julie James, and followed up with a letter and emails from our sister groups, you know, they have avoided meeting with us, you know, so they've ignored that in effect. It's, you know, it's desperately concerning really to be treated by your democratic leaders in that very anti-democratic way. I'm sure we're going to come on to the LGBTQ plus plan of Welsh Government as well. And, you know, we know that they plan, you know, their stated plan is to seek the powers to introduce self-ID in law in Wales on the so-called statement of making us the most friendly LGBTQ plus nation in Europe. We won't be very friendly for women, unfortunately, but they're in total denial about any sort of clash with women's rights there. And they, you know, they've informed us several times in letters that there's no evidence, no compelling evidence to substantiate that. But we know that they are introducing self-ID via, you know, effectively by the back door in policies with organisations, in other secondary legislation, you know, their proposal to introduce gender quotas for the increased amount of members, the proposed increased amount of members for the Senedd has got self-ID all over it. And we know that they are banking on opposition not having the energy or the funds for a legal fight, or that we will be distracted by the cost of living crisis, that they know that they are acting unlawfully, but they intend on doing it anyway. So we know that that's happening. So if anybody from Welsh Government is listening or is mindful to listen at any time, you know, break the habit of a lifetime and listen. We know, and we're not tired of this, and we are going to resist you. So just bear that in mind.
I'm just going to add a couple of pictures here. Let's see. Let's add those in and see if you can enjoy some of these. Can the plan? That's one of yours, isn't it? Was that? Do you want to talk us through this? Was this a demonstration or?
Yeah, that was the Merched Cymru demo outside the Senedd that Cathy was talking about, where she met me in 2021. That was, wasn't it? So that was the original RSC demo that we did.
Right, and this one, dim diolch, no thank you.
No thank you. And on the bottom it says rhyw, nid rhywedd, which means sex, yeah, sex, not gender. So that was from that rally as well, I think.
Yeah,
that was, yeah.
And,
so just
so go on, carry on.
I was going to say, carrying on from Cathy's point about why is Welsh Government so enraptured, I think quickly there's two other sort of sides to that. One, we know that they only listen to lobby groups or others that have the viewpoint that they want to hear. So we know, for example, Stonewall are massively influential to Welsh Government. And I was looking at the data today, and last year, Welsh Government were the body that paid the highest amount to Stonewall, which was £168,870. Only second, the Scottish Government. So we can see instantly that, you know, they're using Stonewall as their own personal advisors, and they've also got people like, you know, E.J. Reynolds and McGuinness on their expert panels. So they are really only listening to the voices that they want to hear, and then they're using that as, you know, proof that they've had external consultation with people. And also another thing in Wales is we do not have any media that is currently supporting us in this fight. So ordinary people on the ground who aren't in this fight like us day in, day out, actually think that we're lying. When I say some of these things to my family, they just cannot believe that it is happening and it's not a one-off. So I think until we get something in Wales that is really going to let everybody else know what is happening in Welsh government and to women and girls' rights, it's going to be a long, long fight for us. But, you know, there are a few journalists now coming through and actually supporting us. So hopefully, as long as they can get their articles published and the organisations that they publish for can see that they're not going to get all this backlash, then hopefully that will just grow for us. But I think, you know, as Cathy said, it's not, you know, there's so many things that are affecting why Welsh government is so successful in this.
They've got a kind of stranglehold on politics, but
have.
also they seem to have a stranglehold on the media too, don't they? So is there any way that, I mean, is the Welsh papers, they're presumably not prepared to rock the boat?
No, you know, they're not, and you know, who knows the reasons for that? You know, it's baffling, isn't it? Really,
access, I think.
Yeah, access, I think, can be the only reason that they're frightened of losing access to sort of Welsh government ministers, and given the stranglehold of power really in Wales, you know, that would be disastrous for editors of those publications. So, you know, as sort of campaigning groups, we've had to go national really, and, you know, thankfully national media has really picked up on this issue, that they are interested in the issues in Wales. So, you know, these articles are going to sort of rock out nationally really. But, you know, if you look at the mainstream Welsh publications, you know, with a couple of little exceptions really, I think Nation Cymru have published some articles, but the other sort of main Welsh media, you know, BBC Wales, ITV Wales, Wales Online,
It's online,
completely ignoring it.
Comment from Anne here: Welsh media isn't very strong. Lots of small local papers.
Yeah,
I think that's got to have a.
Yeah, and you know, the Western Telegraph did cover the protest at St David's, so you know that was really encouraging to see that happening. But obviously, that just has a local sphere of interest. Then, you know, the sort of, you know, the sort of broad reach then isn't necessarily there, which is why we've had to go to sort of national media, and I'm really glad that they picked up on it.
Do you think, is it possible that in the same way that when the Scottish government started making these moves to have self-ID, it suddenly broke the dam, if you like, broke the silence, and the mainstream newspapers, with sometimes London newspapers with Scottish branches, if you like, or Scottish editions, started publishing and started questioning what was going on. And that's when the people of Scotland began to wake up. How far do you see that as likely to be repeated if Mr. Drakeford and his acolytes go ahead and try and do self-ID in Wales?
Well, he's already reinforced that. He said it again last week or the week before, that he was actually going for self-ID, even though, you know, Wales doesn't have the same powers that Scotland does. We do not have the power to enforce self-ID in this country. And David T.C. Davis, who was the Secretary of State for Wales, if you know, people may have read that, he said that he is not going to give the power to Wales to be able to do that. So the fact that Mark Drakeford is totally deaf to what has been said to him, and he's still doing that, does what Cathy just says. They are just not afraid of being ousted from government. Labour has been in Wales government for, I think it was around 100 years. We haven't had a break in Welsh Labour. So they're not as scared as they are in Scotland. Scotland has had a changeover where Wales hasn't. So I just think that arrogance of, you know, Wales always votes for Labour and whatever we do is not going to influence them. I think they've still got that really strong arrogance going. Whether it will break, I don't know. But the fact that they can't do it, you know,
but
the fact that they can't do it is not making, you know, you'd think that they intend doing it anyway. You know, they intend to push this through as far as they can, and you know, and hope that a legal battle won't take place. I mean, you know, as Ali said, you know, David T.C. Davis will be resistant to the devolution of any more powers. And, you know, he in effect would be Wales's Alistair Jack, wouldn't he, at the moment, really? You know,
but that's at the moment. Presumably,
exactly.
Next year, if there's a general election, things may well change.
Yeah, and you know, and that's the sort of concerning thing, really, because Welsh Government want to push this through for 2026. Well, you know, current indications are that nationally there will be a change of government then. You know, Mr. Starmer is sort of making, should he obtain power, is making little noises all the time, doesn't he? But I mean, his last, you know, his comments are desperately woolly on this issue, aren't they, really, around you know, around the preservation of, you know, single-sex spaces, etc. And he makes these comments about modernising, you know, the Act, which are really worrying because there's nothing specific in there. And of course, we've learned that, you know, from Mr. Starmer that he believes that 1% of, 0.1% of women do have a penis, which is really concerning.
I heard a really good joke today from the Home Secretary, which I've never heard before, thinking that he might become the first female Labour Prime Minister. But, there we are. So the main challenges then for women's groups and women generally in Wales lie in what? The difficulty of combating media radio silence.
It's definitely a huge worry for us, you know, and the sort of the backdoor bringing in of self-ID, really, without, you know, that being sort of, you know, based in law, really, in Wales, you know, that's happening. I mean, the LGBTQ plus plan, which was announced a few months ago, being very much championed by Deputy Minister Hannah Blithen. When the consultation came out in relation to that, you know, it contained initially a very chilling statement that any responses that they felt were hateful would be passed to the authorities. The stated position of Welsh Government, and they'll quite happily trot this out in the Senedd time and time again, is that trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary identities are valid, and they will come out with that time and time again. I mean, in the LGBTQ plus plan, there was very little reference to the words gay and hardly any reference to the words lesbian. Merched Cymru actually did a count of this at the time in the consultation and in the plan, and there's the graph they did. But, you know, I think there were around about 10 times the references to trans and transgender, over 100 references.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. In the priorities of the action plan, lesbian was mentioned 3 times, transgender was mentioned 24 times, and gay was mentioned 3 times. In the recommendations, lesbian was mentioned 13 times, gay 14 times. Trans was mentioned 111 times. So we're really talking about a plan that has nothing to do with lesbian or gay or bisexual people. It's a T and a Q and a plus plan.
And the plan erases same-sex attraction, which is no surprise to anybody. You know, that has absolutely gone out of the window. There were, you know, over 1,000 responses to the consultation, which Welsh Government have failed to publish or allow anyone to see. And we think that many of these will have commented on the impact on women's rights. But, you know, and we know they committed to an absolute ban on conversion therapy, X markers on official documents, and having a Welsh GIDS service as well. And in another piece of good news for us, I noticed that Dr. Adrian Harrop is down at Cardiff and Vale Health Trust now. So somebody wasn't doing their duties at the border that day. Come on, Welsh women.
Now I'm putting up some pictures. This was the Pride March in Cardiff. Was it last year or the year before?
Last year.
Last year. And I think Get the L Out did an action there. I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's talking about the cotton ceiling. Cotton ceiling is rape, and that's to do with the idea, the notion that's been publicised by some trans activists that they're trying to get through the cotton ceiling, which is cotton pants, in fact, effectively. And I can see some activists, some lesbian activists there saying lesbian, not queer. They're trying to distance themselves from the queue. That's at the start. Great big display in front of the Pride March. Trans activism erases lesbians.
And if you look to the right,
Yeah.
lesbians don't like penises, you may see two lesbian allies holding that as well.
Oh, yes.
It's me and Cathy.
I
went
see,
up
that's
first.
right,
Yeah.
that's right. There you go.
Yeah.
And what happened there then? I know what happened, but perhaps you'll tell some of our English members, listeners here, what happened at the Pride March.
Well, Cardiff Pride March is obviously one of the biggest ones. It is the biggest one in Wales. And we had decided amongst, well, Get the L Out with the leader in it, and they wanted to do some kind of activism because Cardiff Pride in particular were not allowing lesbian groups to actually join the parade anymore. So, this took months of work. So what happened was we travelled to a location just outside Cardiff, did a bit of training around what would happen, how you hold your banners, everything. And then we turned up on the day, very inconspicuous, all just milling about the front of where it was going to come around. And as soon as we heard it coming around the back, me and Cathy were actually the first ones out onto the street. And I have to say, it was so nerve-wracking. I was nearly sick, seriously. So we ran out and we just pulled the banner out, and then the others came in from the side and we just stopped. We stopped and we stopped the march for quite a while. It was around 12 minutes, somebody said, which to stop a huge march like that was massive. So, but for me, being at the front of the crowd, what was mostly sort of disconcerting for me was the amount of women who, I don't know, they looked trans or non-binary, were screaming in my face, spitting in my face, basically saying lesbians do like penises, out of the way, you don't speak for me, for example. The police were trying desperately to be very nice for the first couple of minutes. They were really trying to use their training to get us to move, and we just wouldn't. And then it got quite nasty. So then the police started threatening to sort of arrest us and move us along. And eventually, after 12 minutes, we thought, do you know what? You've all taken enough pictures of us. We were in the media, and we put our banners away and we walked off and we disappeared and we let everybody go ahead. But that really did make a massive impact in the media, and that was talked about for months afterwards about what we did. But I think every Pride March has been terrified ever since, just in case we turn up again.
Good.
Yeah. So, but it was a huge thing to do that in front, because we were in front of the march. We didn't go behind it. We didn't go in the middle. We were in front of it. So,
and they couldn't move until, and while you were there, they were stopped.
Yeah. And
Everyone.
Kate is in, I think, listening, and she's in there as well. I thought I better point it out because she pointed it out.
Yes, she's there.
But she's got a note in the comments. As a result, my picture's in there. As a result, TRA's published pictures of my office online, and I had to have a security escort into and out of work for a week.
It was terrible, but on the plus side, the video of it, which is on Get the L Out site, is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, there we are. There we are.
And we certainly appreciated online by Martina Navratilova as well, which is the greatest accolade as far as I was concerned. We should get some praise from Martina. Thank you, Martina.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, that's quite a demonstration, and for 12 minutes you got a lot of publicity. And I'm hoping that will have had a real effect. So you're trying to raise a profile, which is good, for all sorts of women, yourselves and lesbians. Bisexuals don't get a name check at all, presumably in the action plan.
Well, I'll tell you, bisexuals got mentioned 6 times in the priorities, and they got mentioned 23 times in the recommendations. Gosh. Again, double what lesbian did and double what gay did. Gosh,
it's obviously worth a read, that action plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's some more comments, I think, in the chat. Oh yeah, somebody appreciating the praise from Martina. And Lily D says you picked at least one lesbian at the march, a friend of mine. Excellent.
Brilliant.
Well done. Tara's proud of you all day and even now. Well done. Okay, well look, that's a really good activity. And what else have you done? Welsh women in WRN Wales and Merched Cymru to push back against this. You were talking about St David's. Shall I see if I can find pictures of St David's?
That was fun.
Carry on then.
Okay, well, you know, representatives of various groups across Wales, so a bunch of women really just thought that, well, if Mark Drakeford and his ministers won't listen to us, we will, you know, if the mountain won't come to us, we'll go to the mountain, in effect. So Mr Drakeford was speaking at, I think, at some sort of Festival of Ideas or the Big Ideas event in St David's Cathedral, in St David's, in the cathedral at St David's in Wales. So women attended, and during his speech, towards the beginning of the speech, walked silently up to the front of the cathedral and stood behind him with various banners, some of which you can see there, really, you know, Labour has a woman problem, you know, sex not gender, etc., and stood there behind him for the duration of his speech. You know, a very angry woman at the end ran up and tore down the banners and made some ridiculous, you know, shouted out something ridiculous. But she was the only one, really, and a lot of the audience afterwards, you know, did relate that when they gave a round of applause afterwards, it was for the women and not necessarily for Mr Drake. If anybody's listened, you know, it's very difficult to make a speech. I'm not taking anything away from that, but if anybody has listened to our First Minister making a speech, probably the women with the banners was probably the most exciting thing that has ever happened during a Mark Drakeford speech, and it probably did him a favour, I think. But, you know, certainly helped in sort of highlighting the issues. We had coverage in the Western Telegraph. The rest of the Welsh media, despite there being a BBC Wales reporter sitting in the audience, totally ignored it, as usual. But we will continue carrying out these actions. You know, we are not going to just sort of sit meekly away, being ignored by Welsh Government. You know, if they're going to totally ignore us, we're going to turn up. So it's like the pantomime, isn't it? She's behind you. So
what's on the handwritten? Menyw Odolyn Dynol Benua? Benwaith?
Adult human female.
Of course. Definitional.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Right. Well, those are the pictures from there. Let's see. Universities here and in Scotland, universities have been the seat of a lot of the activity. How's it been in Wales? It's
sort of, you know, we're seeing the same depressing situation. You know, Ali will cover some of it now as well, but our universities are no different here. You know, a small group of activists, and they are a small group, who are unable to tolerate any diversity of thought, oppress other people in silence and compliance. And sadly, these often include staff as well as students. In 2021, a group of academics in Cardiff University put in an open letter to the university questioning Cardiff University's relationship with Stonewall. This led to protests, threats of repercussions, images of individuals holding guns being posted, damage to a car in one case, mention then within the university LGBTQ plus group of kneecappings and throat punching needing to take place. No action was taken against any individual by the university or by South Wales Police against any individuals, you know, and that obviously has a hugely chilling effect then on the ability of anybody to speak out. It sends a very clear message of what will happen if they speak out. You know, there won't be any repercussions for the people doing that. Swansea University in early 2022, in January 22, the Feminist Society there were hounded by student activists who made an allegation of transphobia against them. Their sin was restricting membership of the Feminist Society to females only and sharing books for discussion like Material Girls by Kathleen Stock. And for the last 16 months, the student union has claimed to be investigating the allegations against the Feminist Society with no update whatsoever, no progress on that, and no name as to who is investigating it, which is curious. Both Ali and I and numerous women and sister groups wrote to the university Vice-Chancellor at the time, and to the individuals involved in the student union as well, the elected officials of the student union and the officers of the student union, requesting meetings to discuss this sort of situation. We've had nothing back from them to this day. They've been studiously ignoring us. And to add insult to injury, the university has now closed down the feminist society there as well, despite their objections to that. So the women who were part of that feminist society, you know, were terrified of repercussions from activists, had no support from the university. And the message is loud and clear, isn't it, to female students, that this will happen to them as well, and it's best to be quiet. But, you know, we had an incredibly brave female leading that feminist society at the time, Abby Claren, who came to speak at various different events and that we're still in touch with. You know, she is hugely inspirational. Universities are the places where, you know, your feminist ideals, like Ali and I have mentioned, are often honed. You get an opportunity to explore ideas, read, you know, feminist academics, debate and consider. And as an ex-student of Swansea University myself, that period of my life was really important for me. It's deplorable that feminism now is a dirty word in universities. Both Ali and I attended at the last Freshers' Fair and gave out cards from Swansea Bay Resistors to let female students know what was going on. Many of them were, you know, shocked to the core, really, at what was happening. But we have seen some progress in that recently we've both attended an event at the Taliesin in the theatre on campus at Swansea University called Silencing Women, which was organised by a local group and platformed Professor Joe Phoenix, Alice Sullivan and Judith Swisser, and Joan Smith was there as well. So that went ahead and was really successful, despite there being a gaggle of protesters outside shouting and their petition to try and stop the event taking place. It went ahead. So that was progress. But Ali, you've seen that same in other universities across Wales, haven't you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about understanding that it's not just about free speech. It's also about the queering of academia and the culture that students are now living in within the university. So what that does, it just literally opens up universities for the sex industry to come in and play on those queer theories. So if any of you remember what happened in Aberystwyth University last year, they did something called a SHAG week and a year-long campaign. So SHAG stood for Sexual Health Awareness and Guidance Week, which, you know, if you just read that, it sounds, well, that's great. It's about contraception, it's about STIs. It was nothing of the kind. When I looked at the week's activities, I was absolutely horrified. It was all about kink, BDSM, prostitution. They didn't call it that, prostitution, pole dancing. So basically it was all about sort of, you know, the sex industry sort of getting in there and normalizing, you know, and not shaming girls in particular for, you know, being involved in their kink, which inadvertently meant, you know, gagging them, strangling them, spitting in their faces. If you read some of the stuff, it was just, I mean, it was horrifying. If I was a mother of a daughter there, I would have just, you know, gone in and taken her out straight away. So I actually did a blog post for Filia because I was contacted through Filia by somebody who lived in West Wales and attended the university. She was an older student, older woman, and she just couldn't believe what she was seeing. And what was really, I thought, really heartening though, was many of the younger girls in her, younger women in her class were actually asking her for advice and saying, we don't know what we can do to stop this, how to say no, how do we actually, you know, say I don't want to go to these kink classes without being shamed for not wanting to go. So yeah, so I did a big blog post on that, and I really want to do something to follow that up this year. But I do think you need, you know, we do need to remember that queering and queer theory is around sexuality and basically opening that up for all sorts of damaging stuff for our young women.
Yeah. There's very persuasive advice from Joanna Cherry's King's Council, Aidan O'Neill, I think his name is, but yeah, Aidan O'Neill, Casey, who suggests that the stand didn't have a leg to stand on in cancelling Joe Cherry's audience, which has actually made them turn to and reschedule her event, which they had invited her in the first place. So do you think that the advice that Mr. O'Neill has given will be able to be translated to all these other circumstances where there's been discriminatory, absolutely outrageous discriminatory activity?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I don't think it'll work in all circumstances, especially in terms of universities and university venues. I think they're just they're doubling down on everything from what I can see. So I think perhaps some will. For me, it's as well around the potential if they're going to lose money. It always comes down to losing money or losing face or losing something. So the universities, for example, me and Cathy, when we were trying to speak to the Vice Chancellor, we're trying to frame it around, how is this university going to look to overseas students, to other women that they're not going to choose your university. But unfortunately, that didn't work. So Swansea University must have enough students and have enough money for them not to be able to do that. But I do think we do definitely have scope in some other institutions because we are seeing some subtle changes. But for me, though, I think it just depends who's working there as well. It really does. It can come down to the simple fact that the person in charge of bookings can be on your side. For example, I talked about one of the women's aid groups who wouldn't come to the conference. They had originally said, yes, we won't come, but you can put a stall out for us. I said, absolutely. And then all of a sudden, the CEO messaged me and said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to withdraw because all my staff are in uproar about it. And I felt like saying, well, who's in charge here? Is that you or your staff? So I do think it comes down to the courage and the gumption of the person in charge as well.
But that's an instance where Aidan O'Neill's advice would play, because it's the advice would be that the organisation, Welsh Women's Aid, can't discriminate against you just because their staff are playing silly baits.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. They can even think that that's acceptable in terms of being management and not being able to insist that their staff do their jobs.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you go on to Joanna Cherry's Twitter feed, she's got the advice from Aidan O'Neill KC is there in a PDF and it's in a Dropbox. So if anybody wants it, I've read it. It looks really, really interesting, and I think it will make a difference overall as people see that the activities that was going to be cancelled in Scotland could well be translated like Welsh Women's Aid. And the idea that Welsh Women's Aid wouldn't want women visiting Wales to be helped or to be given information, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. Tell me about Chwarae Teg. Fair play. It means fair play, but obviously they're not bothered about fair play.
Ali, Chwarae Teg obviously is Welsh fair play.
Yeah.
But there's an organisation then called the Women's Equality Network. Ali, perhaps we cover what they stand for.
Well, unfortunately, both of them are totally under the sort of puppet strings of Welsh government, and which is the one that which is the one that threw everybody out? Was that Chwarae Teg?
Hang on, let me just.
I don't remember which one it was.
Oh yes, I think it was, wasn't it? It was the Women's Equality Network. I think basically, Chwarae Teg, I think, are the organisation has been mentioned who are going to help Plaid Cymru. I mean, you've probably read about all the debacle around the misogyny and sexual harassment report within Plaid Cymru, and how horrendous that situation is really that they've been presiding over for years and not getting to grips with. Chwarae Teg apparently are going to sort of help them with so I'm told anecdotally, are going to help them with sort of putting that situation right. But it doesn't engender a lot of confidence, really, that chwarae teg, when you dig through their documents, I think everybody is a woman these days. So, you know, what hope is there to tackle a sex-based issue if you cannot decide who you're representing, and, you know, you cannot define, you know, who are the members of that sex? You know, that's an issue. The Women's Equality Network, you know, have got the same, you know, ideological problem, really, as well, sort of hard baked in. You know, they receive funding from Welsh Government, obviously, which they're quite fond of, and it's perhaps not in a financial interest, really, to have any other policy. But, you know, when Ali mentioned, you know, universities, and Alison, you yourself said, you know, this is where we need brave women, brave men to stand up and be counted and exercise leadership. It is very, very easy to go along with the safest line of resistance. But, you know, it's that saying, isn't it? All it takes for evil to prevail is for good men or good women to do nothing. And that is very, very wise here, really. You know, there's a lot of us, I suspect, in this group who could be sitting down doing something pleasant, but have chosen to sort of stand up and try and make a difference. You know, I suspect, you know, we'll be pulling the tentacles of this out of every organisation for many decades to come, you know, should we be successful. And we are going to be successful, aren't we? Because we're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that that's the case. But we will be fighting hard for decades to come. But, you know, the energy is there to do it. We need brave men and women to be there for that battle. And unfortunately, they're not in organisations like chwarae teg and the Women's Equality Network.
I think what seems to be a common thread here with chwarae teg, Women's Equality Network, Welsh Women's Aid, for example, is they're all funded by Welsh Government. So, you know, I know for Women's Aid, for example, because I worked with them for a long time, and I was a trustee for 12 years for my local Women's Aid. When you have Welsh Government funding, you have to tick the box to say that you'll adhere to their policies and their terms and conditions. And their terms and conditions will now include, obviously, their equality policy, which means trans women are women, which means you have to open up your refuge to trans women. So, you know, we mentioned having a bit of gumption. It will take a lot for an organisation to say, sorry, we don't want your money. So, you know, are they going to throw all the kudos of being paid by Welsh Government and becoming an advisor to Welsh Government, which chwarae teg and WEN are, and Welsh Women's Aid? Money always talks, doesn't it, for organisations who feel they can't get it from anywhere else. So I don't know how are we going to get over that? I just don't know. But somebody's got to crack somewhere and say, I'm not going to take your money anymore if it means my refuge is going to have a meal in it.
Well, it may need that. But on the other hand, there's a case coming up soon, I think, in Brighton. A woman who wasn't able to get single-sex help after a rape was discriminated against, and she's suing them for not providing at least one female only. I mean, they've got trans only, they've got mixed sex, they haven't even got one single sex. That's obviously direct discrimination, and that case is going to come up this summer, I believe. And I think that, you know, you'll be able to waive that, hopefully, if she wins, you'll be able to waive that in front of Welsh Women's Aid, and you know, judicially review the Welsh Government if it carries on insisting that unlawful policies have got to be adhered to by these agencies. But that's going to be a real big big job. I think you'd need a crowdfunder, and I think we'd all need to help. Help fund it. So make sure if and when it comes about that you make sure that we all get that crowdfunder and we can support it. Now look, I've got loads more questions. I think there's one or two comments that you'll have seen in the chat from people, some really supportive. Everything in the sex versus gender battle is distasteful. Una Jane was talking to a man about this just this morning, and he was on board. I think it's remarkable that a lot of men know exactly what a woman is and don't want to have this besmirch us. Another comment: we can't consent to this. There's a website. We can't consent to this, which is all about the appalling behaviour of some sexual partners in strangling their partners and doing really distasteful and GBH, effectively, grievous bodily harm to their women partners. It's never men who end up being strangled to death, is it? Strangely, these sex games don't seem to be working both ways.
Well, it's called breath play now. It's not called strangulation. It's called breath play.
It's actually a strangulation then.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's call it by the name, the real thing, because this is why we got into this problem in the first place, is using the vocabulary they want us to use, it's a really, really terrible thing. Presumably, the Welsh Civil Service is just as captured as Whitehall's.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, there is, the SEEN network is within Welsh Government. We know that.
Good.
But we know as well that the atmosphere within Welsh Government is one in which civil servants are afraid to voice or be known to have any of what's termed as gender critical views. I've had personal accounts from people within Welsh Government where they've addressed the exclusion of sex from policy documents that are dealing with the Equality Act protected characteristics, and they've been warned by managers not to raise the issue again. There is a real sort of culture of fear around here where they've been told that, sex is sort of outdated in effect and that gender has taken over. And we know, as I've said, that Welsh Government are intent on bringing in self-ID, both overtly and by the back door as well. We know they want to introduce, as I've said, the gender quotas bill for 2026 and are banking on this not being challenged legally, despite having legal advice telling them that they lack legal competence to do it. So, there's a real sort of situation for civil service with Welsh Government really in sort of, in being able to sort of speak and be heard.
I think this is it's a real problem. I can see that in Scotland and in Wales, there's a drive by their devolved governments to make their mark and stand up to the horrible English government, the Westminster government. I get that. That's natural enough. But the way they're doing it is actually harming women and girls, and actually harming boys and men too, because men and boys, they don't deserve to be victimized either by the sort of policies of gender trying to persuade them that they are other than their real sexed bodies. The effect on lesbian women and gay men in Wales, how's that playing out? Do they get it, or are they captured by pride?
It's like everything. There's half and half, isn't there? There were an awful lot of what I thought were gay people that were totally captured, were spitting in our face and telling us we were wrong. But equally, there's many that obviously don't believe that. So you have the Lesbian Gay Bisexual Alliance Cymru, have the Gay Men's Network. And I don't know if people have seen this, but, you've got In Defence of Lesbian Spaces. This is the little booklet that Filia. Have you seen it, Alison?
No, I haven't. Oh, right. Excellent. Right.
Okay, well, I could send you one of these. So as part of the Filia Legacy project, so when they go to obviously a city with a conference, for a time afterwards, they work with the communities that they were in. So they worked with the LGBT Alliance Cymru and produced that, which is fantastic. And absolutely, I mean, the effect on lesbian and gay spaces has been catastrophic in Wales. I mean, there just aren't any left. If there are, they're in secret, it's only amongst, as they are in England, only amongst people that know, using passwords to get in. And, what we're hearing is it's literally going back to the 1970s, where they couldn't be out and couldn't be proud and couldn't have a lesbian disco. When I was working in Swansea Women's Centre, we used to have lesbian discos every month. We'd have lesbian nights in one of our local cafes. I mean, absolutely unheard of. You can't even have a woman-only disco, never mind a lesbian-only disco. So, it's not just about, spaces, is it? It's about the erasure of lesbian and gay young men. It's that we can have a laugh, but they call it trans in the gay way, but it actually is, what would be young lesbians and young gays are just being turned into these non-binary trans kids. So we're losing a whole generation of what could be lesbian and gay people. It's awful.
I think that we've got our last few minutes, and I'd like to have a look at this particular
My little
booklet. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we are. There's there's a picture of the handbook. Do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, so this came to be purely because of the failure of the RSC curriculum in Wales. So me and another colleague from Merched Cymru were just fed up really of, filling in consultation forms, writing letters, complaining, waving banners about the RSC curriculum. And we just thought, look, Welsh Government's not going to do anything that we say. Let's just actually go out and do something that fills the gaps that we were talking about. So that's what we did. So looking at the statistics that Estyn talked about with young girls in schools, for example, around 61% of female students have experienced sexual harassment. 80% of girls think schools need to do more to support young people's sex and relationships education, and specifically around sexual exploitation and harassment in schools. We just decided that we would go ahead and do it. So we won a bit of funding, and again, Filia got the funding for us, and we literally had carte blanche about what we would do. Most of the people that won the funding from this stream, and it was called a best friends whatever handbook, they did things on TikTok and they did things online, and we really wanted it to be an actual physical thing that young girls would always have safe, could pass on to another friend, take it home with them, and that's what we did. We made it. It was very difficult. It actually took us months and months to decide how to sort of come up with a concept. It had to be pretty enough and appealing enough that young girls would want it and want it to keep and want to pass it on. And it had to be sort of girly enough, if that's what you want to call it, that boys wouldn't touch it, because we didn't want boys to pick this up and see what we were telling girls. And that's what we did. So we looked at sort of key things that girls were telling us they wanted to know more about. And that was around relationships, family problems, and body issues. So we've got topics such as sexting, sexual assault, spiking, grooming. And I got stuff which is really important to me around pornography and OnlyFans, because that's one of my main interests, and body image, eating disorders. And then we've got a section on domestic abuse, forced marriage, FGM, honor-based violence, and just a couple of pages per topic. Very bump. This is what it is. Who's at risk? What you can do about it, how you can help your friend, in a way that was not patronizing, in a way that was not telling them what to do. So they didn't open it and think, oh, this is just my teacher telling me, not to sext. Wasn't like that at all. And we had a few focus groups before we wrote it, and we've got a lot of feedback forms back from some of the young people that we've sent them out to. Originally, we wanted them to be in Welsh schools, and I have to say it's been very disappointing that Welsh schools really won't touch them, because they're so under the cloud of Welsh Government's curriculum. But it has been taken up massively in England, which is interesting. But we do have quite a few organisations in Wales picking them up. So we've got a mother and baby unit, for example. Having Cymru have picked them up in their domestic abuse work. And we're really thrilled that NIA, the Karen and Gala Smith's organisation in London, uses them. Southwell Black Sisters are going to take them, and an organisation called Rights for Girls. And there's a big comprehensive school in Coventry that is actually using them as well. And we've got that school because the woman who runs the health and wellbeing support staff is my daughter's best friend. So she took them on board. So, but we've had excellent feedback from the young girls themselves. It is in pilot phase. So we're taking on board what they're telling us, and then we'll be relaunching it early next year with a website, so there's more up-to-date information that we can keep moving. There's resources in the back, which is quite Wales heavy because it's supposed to be a Welsh booklet. Yeah, and the idea was, which I think is fantastic, that it's supposed to be, that you can help your friend, but we know psychologically that's a bit of a trick. So if a girl is reading this, oh, I can help my friend, she's going to help herself around it as well. So, but as I said, if you do want a booklet just for yourself, for your daughter, your granddaughter, your cousin, whatever, or if you're in an organisation, Girl Guiding, or if you run a support group, please let me know. And they are free, so I can send them off to you. But really, they just fill the gap where, Welsh Government doesn't use the word girl, for example. This is for girls, and I name girls throughout it. There's no, mucking about with identities, or if you think you're this is for biological girls, and they're the ones that will read it and appreciate it. So please either get in touch with Alison, or me, and I can send some off to you as well.
Now, has anybody got any questions? We haven't got a lot of time because we've been talking really for nearly 2 hours now, and I guess our guests are going to get a little bit tired. But somebody here, Tara is saying, can I have one of those books, please? I have 2 daughters. If you send an email to...
I'm typing my email address now for
fantastic.
everyone.
Fantastic. So that will be a real boon. And just in other news, I heard yesterday about a long weekend in West Wales, which is do-it-yourself women's empowerment weekend. So if anybody wants more information, it is just for females. And by all means, use the same email maybe as the Ali's, or the one we gave earlier, which was, that's your email, is it? vawgleadwales@felia.org.uk. Smashing. If you send that, an email on that, that'll get to Ali. Fantastic. And Jackie is saying, thanks to our wonderful speakers. Looking forward to seeing you in Edinburgh, Ali, on the 6th of June. What happens on the 6th of June?
I've been invited to give a presentation to the cross-party group on sexual exploitation. I've actually been working in Japan with some survivors there to set up some support services for teenage girls in pornography and prostitution or exiting. It's a huge problem in Japan. So I've been doing some work with those. So I'm just giving a small presentation. Wow, that sounds fantastic. Look, I don't think anybody's got any other questions apart from, here's a comment: become a lawyer, ladies. This is going to be a growth industry for the next 20 years. And somebody else here is a working civil servant in Swansea. Most of them, I think that means most civil servants have got GC views, correct me if I'm wrong. Beth Crotchett, strangulation is now a separate crime, it is, and sex play is no longer a defence. Government has shut the door due to a couple of high-profile cases, shocking cases, won't go into details, where women were killed by partners and they were found not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter. So, there's some shocking things going on, and I think that is making people aware of some of the problems. If anybody wants information about this camp, I don't know if there's an info email. I'll put it in the chat. Here we are.
Can I just say as well, Alison, that I mean, I've got massive respect for women, and men who are trying to change things from being inside political parties. We're not going to achieve anything unless those women, and in some cases men, are prepared to do that, in whichever political party. So it is really seen, it's really appreciated. Our WRN head, Heather, has said that publicly as well, that we really need people to be doing that. So it's a huge thank you, diolch yn fawr, from me to all the people who are prepared to do that. And And if anybody in this wants to come down and join in with our groups in being shrill to Mark Drake anytime, they are most welcome. You know, as I've said, if he thinks my shrill is bad, he hasn't seen my strident yet. So, you know, please, you know, come and
You're
join
going
them.
DEFCON 1 and 2 then, are you? Up to 5. Well, look, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank you for coming and telling us all of this that's been going on. So it's a little bit depressing, but a little bit hopeful as well. And I think the work that you're doing is so constructive and so helpful. Now, I'm going to say our next meeting will be on Monday, the 12th of June. I'll be talking to Victoria Smith about her book, Hags. And it's a really good book. I've read it already. I'm going to be reading it for questions now. Do look out for the announcement or sign up to our website, liberalvoicewomen.org, and we'll send you the invitation as soon as it comes out. Won't be long. We also want to hear from you with any policy related issues or problems that you want us to raise. And if you've got any suggestions for people you'd like us to talk to here, then send them in, because we're always willing to try another question. Not everybody wants to talk to us, mind, so that can be a problem. Thank you to Rachel, to Lisa, our technical staff, and the organisers of our Eventbrite Zoom meetings. Thanks to all of you taking part, putting your two penneth in the chat. It's been really helpful for being part of a great event. And most of all, thanks to our wonderful Welsh women tonight, Cathy Larkman and Ali Morris. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.
Diolch, everyone.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And if anybody's got any questions, you've got the emails there to contact.